Hi there, this is Phil with Phil Effects and another tutorial here. This is part 2 of my practical examples of editing UVs, and I've got a couple students that had some questions on their homework, and I think sometimes the examples they come up with are the best kind of examples and things to do tutorials with, because their problems are real and they're very good questions, and the best way for me to answer those questions is usually just with a tutorial. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're still working on our ray gun here, and the question came up from the student. They're having difficulty understanding why I make cuts when I show how I make cuts and how I piece things together. And again, a little bit of trying to understand. In this example, you can see that we have a seam on the top of the cylinder here. One, why do we want to move that seam? And two, how do we move that seam? So the question came up in class, in fact, of, well, I see how this looks. Why can't we just take this and rotate it? Well, let's show what happens when we do that. So we've got the UVs right here, and I'm going to go in UV mode, and I'm going to select the two ends, and let's just get those out of the way. And I'll put those up here. Notice what Maya does when I move UVs into another UV tile area. It actually creates a pattern for those tiles. So I moved those up here, and it created a tile pattern. If I move them over here, it creates a tile pattern over there. If I overlap between two boundaries, Maya creates and makes tile patterns within the boundaries of where those UVs overlap. So anyway, let's get back to this area here. So let me take these UVs, and so the question was, why don't we just rotate them? Well, we can do that. So let's go in here, and I'll put this in a rotate mode, and I'll rotate the UVs. And you can see that I'm rotating those UVs, but the seam over here still stays the same, okay? The reason it stays the same is these end UVs. Let me deselect here. These guys here. This is a mapping. Again, this is the thing that is so difficult to understand, and I really do understand why it is difficult. These are not actual physical placements. These represent mappings of your texture to a three-dimensional surface. So the mapping of these placements don't change, all right? And because we haven't changed this mapping where the edge of a seam is, even though I rotate it, it still is on the top, all right? So I can take and I can rotate this whole thing completely around, and that seam is still on the top. We haven't moved that. So how do we go in and how do we move that seam? Well, let me do a bunch of undos here. And let's look at how we move that seam. Well, the only way we can move that seam is we need to take a different set of UVs and put those on the end. Well, the best place to do that is on the bottom. And so if I selected these UVs, those are right on the bottom. That would put my seam on the bottom. And the best and easiest way to accomplish that task is we go in, let me turn my knife off, turn that texture off, and I'm just, excuse me, I want my grid back on. I can turn the shaded view off. I can go in here and I can get my knife, and so we'll get the knife, and I'm gonna come right down here, and I'm just gonna cut right down these UVs, and I'm going to split this right down the center. All right, so now we have split that. Drop the tool by hitting the select. So now that we've split that, I can go in, and this is in edge mode. Let me put it in UV. So we can select this set of UVs, and you can see over here, it's selecting the mapping, which would be on the screen side, the left side, all right? And so then if we select this set of UVs over here, that's the right side, all right? Now, if we took and put this set of UVs on the end, that's where my seam would be, right? If I took and put this set of UVs on the end, which is the same seam, that's where my seam will be. So by simply taking now, and let's go in edge mode, and I just want to select these edges, and I'm purposely being a little sloppy again to show that I can select on the inside, but what's important is just where this edge is here, all right? And so what I want to do is I want to do a move and sew. And Maya's going to take this edge, move it all over here, take all the UVs with it, and it's going to sew it right there. So we go up to polygons, we go to move and sew edges, and boom, now we've done that. And now I can take all of these UVs, and actually let me get in UV mode, select all of those, and I can slide those back. And now, okay, so to recap, we successfully moved that seam. And you can see that now because when I select those edges, the seam is now on the bottom. And to do the same exercise as I did before, if we put the checkerboard on here, and if I take and select all of these UVs, we look at that bottom, and let me zoom out here, and I can do a rotate. And I can rotate this around, and the same kind of thing. Doesn't matter how I rotate this. Okay, doesn't matter how I move this, that seam stays on the bottom. The seam stays on the bottom because, again, like I said, these edges, this is the mapping of where this edge is, and this is the physical placement of that mapping. All right, so that's why that seam is now placed on the bottom. The next thing I wanted to show with this example here is let's take a quick look at the distortion map. And we can see a little bit, if we look at distortion on here, that our boxes are really not boxes, they're rectangles. I apologize, in some of my tutorials I interchange between rectangle and box, and I really mean boxes when I'm talking about this. But you can see that this direction is a little bit longer than that direction. So we have some elongation here, which indicates some distortion. You can actually see quite a bit of distortion on the ends here, where these don't look like boxes at all, and they're quite distorted. So we have we got some work that we really have to do to clean the distortion up on both of these. And if you look at the new tutorial, the tutorial I put on there on making custom textures with UV maps, I clearly demonstrate when you put a texture on here other than just something that's with boxes. If you don't clean this up to begin with, and you don't have your boxes square, and you don't have your UVs distortion free, the texture that you put on is going to get significantly distorted. So let's go in and let me deselect this and take this off, and let's put my distortion map on here, and I can see this. And we can see real quick from the color that the color is highlighting where there's distortion. Again, the color itself is not indicative of distortion. In other words, red is not distorted and blue is undistorted. What it says is the distortion, the stretching between these two areas is different. That's what it's indicating. And in terms of how you clean distortion up, it doesn't matter what color you choose to go towards. You just pick one, and that's how you fix it up. So what I'm going to do is let's first start with this bottom again. And let me go in, and right off the bat, we can see, because I moved the seams, you can see these ends. See how this end here is a little bit darker, and this end here is a little bit darker than these are. Well, if you remember when I did my knife cut, it pulled these over a little bit. So this is squashed a little bit tighter, and you can see that the width of this is a little bit narrower than the width over here. That's what's causing some of the distortion right there. So we can real quick fix that. If I grab this and I pull this over just a little bit and pull it out, that lightens up, so it's about the same color. And I grab this and I pull this over, that lightens up, so now it's about the same color. So we fixed that real quick right on the ends. The next thing I want to do is, if I like this right here, I'm going to stay with this, and then what we want to do, this red tone, so I'm going to say that this is my golden tone, and I'm going to make everything match this. So if we go in here and we select these UVs, and I pull this up, I pull that up so that lightens and approaches about the same color. And actually what I want to do, let me do a quick check. So let me take this off and let me put my So that looks fairly good. If I look at these right here, that's this map right there, and this is this end, and this is this end. All right, and if we go in and let's look at all of these, let me scale this. And the thing that's causing the rectangular, things to be rectangular instead of square, I can adjust that. You can see by changing this, by squashing this down a little bit, I make those so they look rectangular. Let me undo that. The other way I can fix that is if I take this and squash this in a little bit, I can get that so those are rectangular that way. All right. So if I do this, that looks pretty good. So we start with rectangles here, and I have this color, and then what I need to do is I need to make this area so it's about the same, this area in the bottom, so it's about the same color as the area on the top. So I'm going to grab all of these UVs, and I'm no longer going to scale, I'm going to move, and I'm going to squash that down so that's about the same color. And I hold down Shift, I select some more UVs, and now I'm going to push that down so it approaches the same kind of color. And this is where you actually do need to look at it. Okay, so you can see, I can see up here, when I push that down, I'm stretching these rectangularly, so that's not going to work. So I need to come in and work with this so it's about the right thing. This is where the color can be misleading. And I've said this before, don't bank on just the color, all right? So let's go in here and let me add the last group here and pull that up. And I think that looks pretty good to me. So we've got that, so it's fairly close. And we end up with a good distortion map, but note, the colors aren't all exactly the same. Part of this has to do with the fact that the size of this cylinder and its diameter is not the same size as this cylinder and its diameter. And that's the reason why some of the colors don't line up, all right? So let's see if I pick some of those. That is this guy. So let's go in and let's just do one of these end caps. And let me demonstrate again how I take use the scale tool primarily for moving UVs so I can clean up this end cap. Let me take this and just get this out of the way so I can just work on this guy. So what I do typically is I'll go in and let me move this up just a little bit so I'm not running into things. And I'll take my scale tool, so I hit the R key, and I work from the inside out, all right, on something cylindrical like this. So I'll take and I'll start to push the color so I get at the color that's approximately the same as what I have down here. And I like to look at what I'm scaling at the same time also. And I can see that that looks just about right. Okay? And then as we get out, we can see where we start to pick up some distortion, all right? So what I want to do is that says there's more scaling or movement that needs to be done on the outside here, but the inside, these inside couple of rings is probably fine. So what I can do is then go in and let me zoom in a little bit, and I hold down the control key on my keyboard and I select all those inside UVs, and then I go around the outside, the next ring up, and I just deselect those. I'm holding down the control key while I just make selection boxes around these UVs, so I deselect them. All right, let me hit the R key, and now I can scale again. And you can see in scaling again, I'm pulling those outside ring in, and I'm getting things so they're closer to being rectangles. All right, that looks pretty good there. Let me hit the control key again, and I'm going to go to the outer ring. Deselect around that outer ring. Okay, hit the scale tool again, and now you can see I pulled that in. my rectangles, excuse me, I keep doing this. My boxes are coming back to being boxes. Hold down the control key. Deselect the next ring out. Go around, get all of those selected. You want to make sure they're all selected, and then work on the next group. We can see the boxes come in. So we're starting to get boxes. Note that the colors aren't, again, exactly the same, okay? And I'm more interested in looking at the distortion than I am the color, all right? And we got something funky going up here at the top and the bottom, but I'm going to fix that in the end here real quick. That'll be a simple fix. So now I need to actually zoom in just a little bit to get into the next row. So I'm going to go in and, again, hold down Control, deselect these. If you're really good with the paint tool, you probably could use that also as opposed to a marquee selection. I've just gotten the habit of using marquees, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue with that. And get this all selected. Go up to the top. Okay, it looks like I have everything. Same kind of thing. Let's scale this. We bring those boxes in, right? Oh, you can see I had a problem. See that? I didn't deselect that. So let me hit Control Z, hit the Control key. That's what happens when you don't select one. All right, now let's try this again. There we go. That looks better. All right, so my boxes come in. And I'm encroaching a little bit outside this area. See this encroachment that's going outside the 1-1 space? That's where this pink is coming in right there. All right. And we can take this just a little bit that way. My mouse is running off my mouse pad here. All right, so let's do that just about like that. And hold on Control, and whoops, I just did undo. I accidentally hit outside, so let me deselect all of these. So now I can go around and we'll work with, the last thing we'll work with is just this outer ring. Okay, so I'll deselect these boxes here. Now I take that and I work with that outer ring. And that looks pretty good. All right, so I have boxes all the way out. I've significantly reduced the distortion. We've got a little bit of problem with some pinching right around this corner. All right, right where this seam is and where this comes in. But depending upon the pattern, the particular pattern you pick, that may or may not be an issue. Let's fix this last little thing. Somewhere in the course of selecting and moving, this UV and this UV got messed up. So we can fix that real quick. Just go in and select all of these UVs and Control select this so I make sure that I don't get anything. Actually, I don't need any of these in the middle here. So I have these UVs here, and I want these all to line up to the furthest to the left, so I click on that, and that fixes that. And that little weirdness that we were seeing over here is now removed, okay? And so now we've pretty much cleaned this up. I think this is about as clean as you're gonna get it. You might be able to push this ring right in here out a little bit or in a little bit, so that would be this ring. So moving with that, you might be able to adjust this a little bit more, but you're going to get a little bit of stretching just due to the very nature of the shape relative to where you put the pattern on there. So we've cleaned up distortions on 2 of the 3 UV sets. There are UV objects that are in this, within this set, and I'll leave the 3rd one for the student to fix up and clean up. But hopefully this demonstrates how you use the scale tool and how we go ahead and move things and move the seams and clean up the distortion. So the next thing I wanted to demonstrate is let's hide this chamber. Control H on that, and let's pull up the trigger, because she's got an interesting example here. So we pull up the trigger, and let me look at the UV editor on the trigger. And right off the bat, we've got some very definite issues here. So you can see the boxes are highly stretched here. They're extremely compressed around the edges. If I go out of looking at the mode for distortion, and we just go in and look at overlaps, everything is pink. So we can see right here that there's significant overlap of all the UVs, and I'm not exactly sure if I go into my channel box here and look at she started with a polymap, an auto projection, and then a planar projection. And so there was a planar projection that was done, and that looks like how the projection that was used to create this UV mapping was through a planar projection. Well, that's fine. We can fix this. So let's go in. I'm going to go into this UV mode. Let me click on UV, hold down Command on the Mac, Control on the PC, go to Shell, select all my UVs. So I have everything here. And if I move this, this is all of the UVs. So everything is overlapped on top of everything. So what we need to do is we need to unfold this entire shape. So the best way to do that is the way that this trigger is viewed in the gun. This is the front of the trigger. This is the top, this is the bottom, this is the back. Well, what are the sides that aren't visible? Well, the top, the back, and the bottom are really not visible. The front is. And so if we put a texture on this trigger, we'd like that texture to go around the trigger face here, around the front, and then wrap around the back, and have that texture be contiguous. So what I want to do in your mind's eye, if you can imagine, I'm going to split these faces. I'm going to split right on this edge and split right down on this edge, and then split right down on that edge. And I'm going to go over here and split all the way down here, and split down commensurate on the back and that edge to here. And then the last place where I'm going to split is right along this edge on the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bottom, imagine it's going to flip down and unwrap, and then this whole back edge is going to flip and unwrap, and then the top is going to unwrap, and then this side and the other side will butterfly out like butterfly wings, and the whole thing will become flattened. So the way to do that is we need to cut along these edges. So again, the way I problem solved this is I looked at the shape and said, okay, how can I take this and unwrap it and unfold it? And I picked my seams. My seams are where I want them to be hidden, and I'm protecting this face where I want to keep this exposed because the texture is going to wrap around this trigger. Well, in this case, looking at this UV map, honestly, I can't tell where anything is looking at this. I could play some games and try and guess where these edges are, but this is where it's nice. You don't have to work with this. I can actually work with the physical object itself and pick the edges there. So we go into edge mode, and I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to start picking edges. So I'm going to pick that edge. I hold down my shift key and I just start going around, and I start picking the edges that I said that I wanted to select. So I need to go in and I'm selecting each of these edges. Okay. And then I said I wanted to cut on the bottom and then come up the other side. So we cut on the bottom and we come up the other side. All right. I don't need to cut on the back, okay? So I'm not going to cut right here. I don't want to select that. I'm going to unfold around that edge. So I select these edges all around here. Oops, not what I wanted to do. Okay, so let me park this Let me double check and make sure I have just the edges that I want, okay? So I'm going to unfold on that edge, I'm going to unfold on that edge, I'm going to unfold on that edge, I'm going to cut that edge, and I'm cutting right along these seams, all right? So I've got the edges where I want to cut correctly selected. And let's call up our UV editor here. And then I want to go down to polygons. And it's real simple. I say cut UV edges. So I cut the UV edges, and it looks like nothing happened. And that is the way that that command works. But what I can do now is let's go into UV mode, and I'm going to select all of these UVs, and I go up to polygons, and we're going to use the unfold command. And let me open this up, and if we reset the settings come up, so it's just one iteration. I actually wanted to do about 10 iterations on the unfold, so I'm going to take this up and crank it up to 10. I'm not using legacy, I'm just using the standard, the new version, the new unfold. And let's do apply and close, and boom. Now look what we have here. Remember I said I was going to cut this and open it up like a butterfly. Well, that's what I've done. And now we have it. So here's the two sides. I can go in here and I select these UVs. That's that side. And all right. And then I select this side. Excuse me, that's that side. And I select this side. That's that side. I have things upside down here. Okay. And remember I said the front, I wanted to keep contiguous, so there's the front, and that's the front of the trigger, all right? So the front of the trigger, in terms of its UVs, is contiguous to the two sides, all right? And this whole extension here is exactly where I cut. See all that? So that's exactly where I made my cut, and I unfolded this. And that ends up being this kind of a tongue that sticks out. And even though there's seams along there, visually this really isn't going to be seen. And if you wanted to, I could go in and I could clean this up and align things just a little bit better. It's difficult to see with the student's texture pattern where the squares are really big. If I take and I put the smaller UV pattern on here, we can see that this actually looks quite distortion free. Looks quite good, by the way, actually, and the mapping is pretty good. There's a little bit of inconsistencies. You can see the boxes there and the boxes there. That is this misalignment where things don't line up completely. I could go in, select all of these, and I could rotate this a little bit. And if I rotated it, things would line up there. You can see that the box there lines up with the box up there, okay? And here's where you see those seams are, but again, this is hidden. If I wanted to get super anal, it's not really required, but I could go in and I could grab these UVs along here. And hold on here, let me see if I can get just those UVs. Yeah, I can get those UVs along here, and I could snap those to one side so they're all even and get these UVs here. You got to be careful what you grab. And I could snap those all to one side. And I actually made things a little bit wider than they should be. So I could take those, use my scale tool, and I can bring that in just a little bit closer together. But I think you get the point. So very quickly, by selecting the proper edges, I cut apart the edges on this trigger. And then using the unfold command, we unfolded this and came up with very quickly with a very good UV mapping for this trigger and how to put this together. And this would provide a distortion-free, close to a distortion-free UV map for putting textures on this trigger. So, all right, I'm going to switch projects here, and we're going to look at a different project. And let me open up this other project. And on this project, same kind of thing. I'm not interested in any of these, the chamber or the nozzle. Actually, I want to look at the trigger again on this project. So we look at the trigger, and this was done, I'm guessing, with an auto projection. And with an auto projection, it split everything apart. And so what we'd like to do is put this back together so it's a little bit closer to what we had before. Now, my 2 cents, the way I would probably do this is I would just reproject it again. But let's go through how you move and sew and piece and put things back together, and just with working with the tools that we have. So the first thing I want to do is, let me go into edge mode, and I'll select this edge, and that goes with that, and I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to just start doing move and sews. So I'm going to move and sew that together and get that UV, go to shell, move that a little bit out of the way, go to edge mode, get this edge, go in here, do a move and sew. All right, and then I'm going to get this edge, do a move and sew. All right, so that's all the edges that go around it. For the moment, let me just grab all those. And just to get this out of the way a little bit, I'll move this up. All right, so now we get to this interior, and I want to look at edges again. So let me double click, and I get all of these inside edges. Well, not only do I get these inside edges, but now I can see which of these faces made those inside edges. All right, and I can see it's this one and this one and this one. All right, now I could just do a move and sew, but there's a problem with this. And the problem is notice I have not selected these ends. So I'll move and sew, but only the selected edges are going to be sewn together. I actually want these ends to sew together also, because I know that the way that this is put together, these are part of an inside face. And if I go in here and we look at this, what do I have going on here? She's got this down here. There's the edges, all right? So that's what I've selected in here. And the way this face is made is there's a double bevel edge that goes down in, okay? You can see that? And so if I don't select these other edges, this edge here, these horizontal edges, they won't get sewn together. So I need to go through, hold my shift key, and I need to select that edge. And I need to select that edge. And I need to select that edge. And I need this edge selected. And okay, so those are selected, those are selected, those are selected. Go up here, the top is selected. And it looks like I have all of the correct edges. Now I can go in and I can do my move and sew. All right, and so that moves and sews and puts things in there. Then I can go in and I can select that, and that corresponds with this guy here. And so we can go in and then go and do a move and sew. And that does a move and sew. Now there's probably some overlap. In fact, I can see some overlap. I'm going to fix that, but I'm not going to worry about it just yet. So let's do the same thing over here. So I'll double select this. Same kind of thing. I need to go in and I need to select these other edges. So I hold down Shift and I select those edges and I select those edges, those edges, those edges, and go over here, move and sew, select this inside edge, move and sew. All right, so then I want to go in and in UVs I want to select these and I want to do an unfold, and my unfold is probably set for 10, so let's do an apply. So that unfolded those, and I think that looks pretty good. And let me take these and apply, and I do an unfold on those. All right, and then what I really want to do, the last thing I want to do is we want to put things together on that front part of the trigger again. And the front part of the trigger, let me look at the gun body and make sure I'm getting the right part. Okay, so the gun body, here we go. So this is the front part of the trigger. So let me hide the gun body again, and we go into here. And I want to go into edge mode. And I want that edge, and I want that edge. Okay, so these are the edges I want. So I'm going to go in, and I'm just going to select these edges. Hold down my shift key. Get those edges, and let's go in and we'll do a move and sew. So we do a move and sew on that. And this doesn't look exactly like my previous one. I actually split in the back and I unfolded there and there. If I wanted to make it look like the other one, I could do that. If I went in and selected that edge and did a cut UV edge, then I went and selected this edge and did a move and sew, that puts that back. Then I can go in and grab all of these UVs. We can do a rotate on that, and then I can do a W and move that up, and do R, scale this down just a little bit, and very quickly, with just a little bit of work and using the UV tools of moving and using the cut tool, using the move and sew tool, and a little judicious picking of the edges, I've reconstructed the UVs on this trigger and ended up with a UV map that's very similar to the one that was just done on the previous example. And that's all done with using cuts, move and sews, picking the right kind of edges, and just looking how the map goes. And so hopefully this will be a good help on, again, a practical example of working with UVs, how to cut and put things together, and well, it should help you out in creating your custom textures. So this has been Phil with Phil Effects. Thanks a lot.